Hi there, everyone. This is Gary Reamer. I am a shareholder of the law firm Maddin, Hauser, and I chair our franchise practice group. And today I'm going to talk about franchise bites, our once a month little entree into various topics that are of interest to franchisors, food for thought, make you think a little bit about improving your system and a generally good way to kind of refocus your brand on an ongoing basis. So, today, what we're going to talk about is franchise relations and communications. So, one of the big issues we have is the problem is managing conflicts among the parties and maintaining alignment with system goals. And really, the basic goals of any system on its simplest level are one, we want everybody to make money, the franchisors and the franchisees. And that's something I try to communicate to franchisees quite often when they have a concern, when they're going into a new system, is that the goal is for everybody to make money. If a franchisee fails, then the franchisor system eventually fails. We also, one of the ongoing goals is to promote the system because you want positive name recognition with your brand. You want a positive image. It's good for everybody across the country then because you don't want something negative that occurs in Nebraska to taint somebody who's located in Dayton, Ohio. So you all have to be working together on an ongoing basis to maintain your maintaining goals. You want everybody to work as a comprehensive unit, synergy. And then you have to try to analyze in advance certain things that can cause issues or strife between the franchisor and the franchisee. Because what ends up happening is it can all go downhill. So, what I want to begin with today is talking a little bit about some of the common issues for dissatisfaction among franchisees. And then I'll talk a little bit of what sometimes the franchisors are frustrated with at the same time. But I think it's more often that the franchisees will begin to complain. So I want to give you some real world examples here because quite often I am contacted by franchisees who are very upset. They want out of the system or they want to sue. And it's bad for everybody. It's costly, it's ineffective. Let's see what's really going on here. One common situation that I've been contacted on recently is the franchisor required that certain products be purchased through the franchisor or its affiliate. In particular, it was a bunch of equipment that was required for performing the services offered by the franchisee. And the two situations that I had is one, they came to me and said that they were required to spend approximately $90,000 on their initial equipment. On the surface, I don't think anything's that unusual, except what ended up happening is the franchisee went online and looked and was able to buy identical. We're talking identical down to serial numbers on certain things that they were looking for. And the replacement cost to get everything identical to what they purchased instead of $90,000 was approximately $19,000. So if you start talking about disgruntled franchisees and the franchisor is using their power to require this purchase that basically was a $70,000 profit for literally the franchisor to buy it at cost and just simply resell it to the franchisee. As we've talked about in the past, a franchisor has the right to dictate the quality and where you buy particular items that are used, whether it's directly from the franchisor as the only supplier or designated vendor, to make sure you have the best quality and consistency here. In this case, at least on the surface, there was such disparity between what the franchisee could pay for this particular item or items and what the actual costs that they were being charged by the franchisor. On the surface, it causes, a level of distrust between the franchisee and the franchisor. And we don't know the underlying reason why this happened. I think the franchisee was saying greed on the part of the franchisor. I don't know if that's the case or not, but the inference is such disparity. It's not to say that the brand you're buying from the franchisor has been custom labeled and there's something uniquely different about it. Again, I received a call from another franchisee that there was a group that was upset. And again, the same situation was that they had bought certain equipment from the franchisor directly, and they went on the open market and discovered that there was an increase of about 200%. And the only difference between the two products was the franchisor put the brand name of the franchise system on that particular item. And there appeared to be no other differences from what somebody else was able to purchase. So when you start having situations like that, that is one of the major issues that causes disharmony between the franchisor and the franchisee. This isn't to say that I will be called by people who said, I can buy my ham at 32 cents a pound and the franchisor is charging me 34 cents per pound. What I will typically say to them is that the franchisor is buying or having you buy from a particular source that can guarantee the supply and the quality of the product. So a nominal difference isn't suitable for kind of complaining, but I think there sometimes has to be open communication when you're contacted by some franchisee complaining about this. Same thing may apply for rebates. You dictate that somebody has to purchase something from a particular distributor, you're disclosing you're getting your rebates. Does that result in a significant increase in what the franchisee is paying for these goods, products, services in comparison to some other source? And is it related to the rebate that you're receiving? You want to look, is it necessary to private brand? Or if you are private branding and there is something different between the product that you're requiring them to purchase and other similar products, you need to communicate them. Another issue where there's often disagreement or people don't like is called a national brand fund or a national advertising fund. Not all franchise systems have it, but what it is it's generally the franchisor is collecting 1, 2, maximum of 3% of gross sales from the franchisee on a monthly basis. And the amount that's collected is to develop advertising and marketing material, potentially tweak the website. It's not supposed to be used for the sale of franchises. But one of the downsides or the warning that's pretty standard is there is no obligation that this ad fund or brand fund spend any of the amount that's collected in the particular territory of the franchisee who contributes this. As a result of that, one, when you're trying to sell your franchises early on, especially, there's some level of displeasure associated with this, even though most larger systems eventually have an advertising fund that will be used to develop things and enhance the brand's image. Another thing you might not think of is important that or that would normally happen is I'll call excess royalty collection. And what does that mean? Sometimes, there's sales tax that comes out. There might be other costs that are taken off the top till you get to your gross revenues. Sometimes there's glitches in your system and you might be sweeping out royalties based on sales tax that needs to be remitted back to the state. So you're overtaking what is required of you, or you're not properly following your definition of gross revenues. And this does happen at times. It's not necessarily intentional, but it's the communication of what happens once you discover that this has occurred. The last thing I want to mention kind of in general here of one of the more common things that the franchisees may care about is changing vendors or suppliers that they need to use. I'll do it in the food service industry. For example, you buy into the franchise system and your point of sale system is one of the more popular ones called Clover. A year into it, the franchisor discovers that, no, I think we're better off using Toast. Well, the problem is you, as the franchisee, may have to cover additional costs to buy hardware that's different than Clover used to have your Toast point of sale system. So that's an example of some of the types of kind of changes that impact the franchisee. The franchisor also gets upset with certain things, and it's a matter of how they communicate it. It may be that you just have a franchisee who tries to do a lot of things different, aren't following the brand standards, aren't following the recipes, aren't, let's say, using the same computer system that you've dictated them to use. That might be on more of an individual basis, but if you're having a dispute with one franchisee, it can fester throughout the entire system unless it's handled properly. So in this slide, it talks about what are the results of all those things I talked about. The results of this going wrong is the franchisee's dissatisfaction, negative press, lawsuit, and decrease in franchise sales. And, this comes out across the board. Number one, franchisees talk to each other. They find out who they are. And you know what? If one bad apple is in there kind of, stirring the pot, you need to make sure you have the right communication to handle this. And the other thing you need to be cognizant of is every year we're going to update your franchise disclosure document. And there's a couple things that will be put in there. Number one, if there is a lawsuit by a franchisee, you need to disclose that for a period of 10 years. And I'll tell you from my standpoint and other standpoints, it all depends what those lawsuits are if they have a big impact. If I see a franchise disclosure document that there's a termination and the franchisor is collecting just money that's owed to them, that doesn't bother me. Sometimes you see a situation where a franchisor is suing a franchisee because their franchise agreement was terminated and they're violating the post-termination non-compete provisions. What can sometimes happen, though, is these franchisees bring countersuits claiming, basically there's been some sort of fraud by the franchisor. You were overcharging for equipment. You were taking too much off the top. It was deceptive. Those are the kind of lawsuits that you want to really avoid having in your franchise disclosure document with disputes with your franchisees. Number one, potential franchisees will get information and will try to track down the franchisee who is involved in the lawsuit to hear what they have to say. The other thing is in association with item 20 that gives a list of the number of franchisees in the system, what state they're located in. There's an exhibit that goes with the franchise disclosure document that gives the name and address and contact information for your current franchisees and any who left the system during the prior fiscal year. So a potential franchisee is going to contact people to try to find these things out. So the last thing you want is to lose sales of a potential great franchisee because there's negative things happening. There's negative press, there's negative communications going on here. So what I really want to talk about now are, what is the solution and how to really implement that? Your solution is really just as simple as communications. It may be bringing groups in and eventually having a conflict resolution process. And these things can be instituted right in your manual as well. So let's talk about what happens if you, as a franchisor, are contacted by somebody who's complaining about the required purchases. They had to spend $90,000 for equipment that they're claiming they could buy the identical same stuff for $19,000. To begin with, if there was something wrong that, say, for example, as the franchisor, you got advice from somebody saying you can charge whatever you want. And now when every franchisee comes in, you can make an extra $70,000. If that's the case, number one, you need to stop that particular practice and make sure you sell it for a practical amount of money. Maybe there's some time that's associated that you had to vet the distributor, the vendors, and everything else. But overall, it should be close to what a franchisee can buy on the open market or less than that. If you discover that you've been overcharging, you need to figure out if there's a way to turn this around and possibly reimburse the franchisee for the additional cost. You might not have all that money, but are you going to give them a credit for a period of time under their royalty fees or something associated with that to make up for it? But again, make the communication. Don't just send an email out. If you have like 10 or 20 franchisees that this may have occurred and you realize it wasn't done right, don't send the email. Call them up one-on-one, explain to them, and if they want to vent, allow them to vent about it, apologize and move on. That's all you can do and make it right. Let's say, you're getting excessive rebates in a particular system. The question is, make sure there's in line with that. Or if there's a particular product that the franchisee is claiming should cost $20,000 and it cost me $27,000, there may be a reason for that. The reason may be is because it is more horsepower. It has this feature or that feature, or it's the cutting edge. And we know that your franchise agreement is for 10 years. And this is the state of the art product. Even though the other product is good, this one is better. Make sure that you have transparent communication, even if it's along the lines, hey, somebody has reached out to us, one of our franchises, because of this. We want to explain to you that this is the product we use. We feel it's the best at this point in time. There's reasons and logic of why you pick things. You are the experts in your field. These people coming in, they're simply using the tools of the internet to see if they can find it cheaper, but it doesn't mean it's the better product. Make sure you communicate that to them. Also, if you're private labeling, make sure that, like, if you're private labeling, don't just charge a bunch more money because you slapped your name on the side of it. Make sure the product's different. If you want to private label it and there's a nominal additional charge, that's fine. Don't jack up the price just because it has the name on the side. You may want them to use products out there that have your name on it for brand recognition, but it doesn't mean you need to charge a premium to that. Your goal as a franchisor is to have the franchisees be successful and not spend more than they need to. When they start off, they're spending a lot of money, and you want to make sure that they're not spending more money than they need to when they're first starting off. Let's talk about the situation of over collecting. What do you do? I've had several franchisors kind of scoff at the fact that we didn't overdo it. If somebody is claiming that this is happening, look into it. You might say nobody else has complained about this. Well, it doesn't mean that you're doing it right. It means that a lot of people, your franchisees, are not paying attention to it. So take the time to look into that and make sure, don't say you're just wrong. Look into it and timely reply. I will say the biggest complaint when there's somebody, a franchisee goes to the franchisor, is a lack of responsiveness. Again, you are supposed to be a team. So even if you come out that they notify you on a Friday, send the email immediately saying, hey, I received your email, I received your text, I received your call, and we will look into it. Don't make them question to know, number one, if it was received. Just call it common courtesy. You want to create a family environment for the franchise system. If somebody reaches out to you, a simple thing of acknowledging it. If it turns out there's a delay in looking into it for whatever reason, hey, my bookkeeping person who's responsible for doing that is on vacation next week. Let them know that. Say, hey, we haven't forgotten about you, but we won't be able to respond till at least the following week. When you do that, you stay ahead of it and you eliminate a level of anxiety for your franchisee because they're not stewing over it. They didn't reply. How come they haven't gotten back to me? Well, we did get back to you and says it won't be next week. It will be the week after for this reason. They can put that aside and it doesn't fester with them at the end of the day. What about the advertising fund that comes up? Again, the advertising fund, you have to make sure you convince them that it's for the overall good of the system. But you might have a situation, I've had some franchisor clients where a majority of their franchisees are condensed in one or two states. And what ends up happening is part of the ad fund, they might be running TV commercials in particular marketplaces because there's such dense population of franchisees. But then you have somebody in Omaha, Nebraska, who's the outlier and isn't getting any benefit to that. What you can consider doing is taking a portion of what Omaha, Nebraska contributed to the ad fund and simply even cut them a check to spend on their own local advertising above and beyond what they're actually doing. Part of it is being practical when you're dealing with this. There's no one size fits all when you're doing this, especially as a start off franchise system. The other thing I would like to also emphasize, if you do have an advertising fund, what I really like to see personally is that the corporate owned locations are contributing to the ad fund on the same basis as the franchisees. The reason why is you want to build a sense of camaraderie that you're contributing to. I've had some franchisors said, "Hey, we spend way more on this than we would put in the ad fund." Great. Reduce the amount that you're spending, quote, individually for your corporate stores. Put this money in and have that, be part of what you're doing as a whole system and contribute additionally. It's perception, not the reality. Even though the corporate owned stores and the franchisors may be contributing significantly more to developing advertising that goes into the ad fund, let them know that you're also contributing. It's just moving dollars around from one bucket to another. But again, it's perception of how the system is viewed at the end of the day. So, this goes to communication, transparent communication. Show people what you're spending on. Try to share with them where it's coming from. Have eventually an advisory council. The advisory council, I've talked about it numerous times. It may be as simply as a monthly Zoom or Teams meeting with the principal owners when the system is early on. Hey, is anybody incurring any problems? Anything, any positive things that people want to report? And then if something comes up, determine if it's something that can be addressed or fixed. That goes a long way that a potential franchisee who wants to come in the system calls up somebody and it's like, well, what happens if, has the system been changing? It has for the better. We have a once a month meeting with all the franchisees, and we were talking about that our particular supplier we wanted to use has been really slow in delivering inventory. Okay, let's find out what the problem is. A franchisor might not be aware of that unless they're communicating. You get bigger, you have different advisory committees. For example, that advertising fund or brand development fund, you could have an advisory council. They're not going to bind what the franchisor is going to do, but it allows the franchisor to hear different voices in the room of what they think money should be spent on when it comes for advertising. And kind of the last thing that's a little tougher to develop, but it can, is what's a conflict resolution protocol? If somebody has a problem, is there more of a formalized program? And when I say it is, I almost describe one to begin with. If I email franchisor as a franchisee and says there's a problem, step one is I need to reply to them within 24 hours or within one business day, with acknowledging receipt of it and giving them an approximate timetable of when we will reply to them, and say we will come up with a solution. And let's say you come up with a solution and the franchisee doesn't like it. The question is there further evaluating it or elevating it to a different level? So all these things kind of come into play, eventually as you grow your brand. But, the overall key to everything is making sure that you communicate and you listen and you're respectful. It's not complicated. People are simple. They want to know that you're listening, paying attention, and explaining to them why you're doing certain things. And if it comes out that you can't give a good reason why you're doing something or justify the cost, then maybe you shouldn't be charging those particular fees, or maybe you need to look at different suppliers, whether it's for inventory, equipment, whatever the case may be. Because, it's frustrating on both sides. I'll kind of like end it with, my conversations that I talk to disgruntled franchisees about. After I've let them vent for a while and say that they were overcharging on this, they weren't charging the proper royalties, this and that, said, okay, my first question for them is, what do you want? Do you want them just to own this to give you a credit? That's great. Or are you so disenchanted with the system that you want to leave? And what does that look like? And what's it going to cost you? Because I explained to the average franchisee that the franchise agreement is the franchisor's best friend. It is completely one-sided. That's the intent of it. The franchisor, as long as they're not doing anything egregious, will generally win in most litigation standpoints, unless you're doing like the significant overcharging, taking the wrong amount of royalties, and never correcting those items. So the franchisee is in a very weak position, but quite often they're angry and they just want the franchisor to listen to them and not say, well, we have a right to do it. Not a great answer long term in developing a strong system. So, with that, I would like to conclude today's breakfast bites or franchise bites, depending on where you are in the country. We will have another one next month. And if you have any questions or would like to bounce an idea off me, feel free to contact me. I always would rather discuss something in advance before you initiate it to try to avoid problems, even if you have the right to do it. It's all about keeping everybody happy, in line, and at least understanding what you're doing at the end of the day. We want everybody's system to grow. And part of that isn't just marketing, it's word of mouth among their franchisees. So remember, communication is key. Talk to them, get them involved, and listen. You're not obligated to do what they want, but if you can listen to them and if they have good ideas, initiate that. And let people know that you took their advice and this is the reason you're doing it. You don't have to be all knowing. You're growing a franchise system based on a business you knew how to operate, but you don't know how to necessarily be a franchisor because it's a completely unique animal. So after all of that, like to keep these short to about 30 minutes. So thank you all very much for your attention. Until next time, have a great day and keep on franchising.